Chapter 1. The invitation that changed everything. Mark Spencer had always believed that life had a sense of humor. Not the kind that made you laugh until your ribs hurt, but the kind that waited until you were comfortable, maybe even smug, and then pulled the rug out from under you with a flourish. Wednesday was shaping up to be one of those smug days. The office was quiet, his inbox was tame, and his coffee was exactly the right temperature. He leaned back in his chair, scrolling through headlines on his phone, when one caught his eye. Grand opening tonight. The Copper Lantern, modern dining meets rustic charm. Mark grinned. Perfect. He and Jenna had been talking about trying something new, and this sounded like the kind of place that would make her eyes light up. 5 months in, and things were good, better than good, really. He wasn't rushing, wasn't overthinking. Patience was his mantra now. He thumbed out a quick text. Hey, just saw a new restaurant opening tonight. The Copper Lantern. Want to check it out? Could be fun. He hit send and pictured her smile when she read it. Jenna loved surprises, and he loved giving them. Mark set his phone down and tried to focus on the spreadsheet glowing on his monitor. But his mind wandered to the evening ahead. Good food, good company, maybe a glass of wine. He imagined her laugh, the one that started soft and then burst out like sunlight through clouds. The phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, expecting an enthusiastic yes. Instead he read, "Sorry, can't tonight. I have a date. But we can go Saturday." Mark blinked. Once, twice. A date? He stared at the words as if they might rearrange themselves into something sensible. Maybe autocorrect had gone rogue. Maybe she meant meeting or update, or literally anything that didn't involve another man. He tapped her name and hit call. Hey! Jenna's voice was bright, cheerful, like nothing was wrong in the world. Hey! Mark said slowly. Got your text. Yeah. Sorry about tonight. But Saturday works, right? He said, choosing his words carefully. Just, quick question. When you said you have a date. Oh yeah, she said as if discussing the weather. Met this guy at a coffee shop. He asked me to dinner. Mark felt something inside him tilt, like a picture frame knocked off balance. Okay, he said, because what else was there? She laughed lightly. Don't worry, it's just dinner, right? He said again, his voice calm. Even, so, you're dating other people? Well, yeah, Jenna said, sounding faintly puzzled. I mean, we never said we were exclusive. Mark stared at the muted glow of his monitor, the spreadsheet forgotten. He wasn't angry, not yet, just stunned. 5 months of shared jokes, late-night talks, and quiet mornings, and she thought they were still in the open sea, no harbor in sight. Got it, he said finally. Thanks for clearing that up. Mark, have fun tonight, he said, and ended the call before his voice could betray him. He sat there for a moment, phone in hand, feeling the weight of silence settle around him. Then, methodically, he opened his contacts and blocked her number. Social media followed. Click, block, until her digital presence vanished like smoke. Mark leaned back and exhaled slowly. 5 months. Not a lifetime. He could walk away with his dignity intact and a handful of good memories. It wasn't what he wanted, but it was what he could accept. Patience, he reminded himself. Patience and boundaries. He stared out the office window at the gray January sky and let out a short, humorless laugh. Perfect, he thought. Things were perfect. And that's when reality decided to knock on the door and kick it off the hinges. Chapter 2. The post-breakup blues. Mark Spencer had never been a fan of melodrama. He didn't throw things, didn't drown his sorrows in whiskey, and didn't post cryptic quotes on social media about betrayal and resilience. He was 33, not 23, and he had a mortgage, a decent credit score, and a growing collection of indoor plants that depended on him for survival. Still, Thursday morning hit differently. He woke up to silence, the kind that felt heavier than usual. No good morning text, no playful emoji, just the faint hum of his refrigerator and the distant sound of a neighbor's dog barking like it had unresolved issues with the universe. Mark stared at the ceiling for a long moment, then rolled out of bed and shuffled to the kitchen. Coffee first, existential dread later. As the machine gurgled to life, he leaned against the counter and replayed yesterday's conversation in his head. Jenna's voice had been so casual, so breezy, like telling him she had a date with another man was the same as saying she'd picked up almond milk instead of regular. He wasn't angry, not really. He'd learned that anger was just a shortcut to bad decisions. But confusion, that was harder to shake. 5 months of shared dinners, inside jokes, and lazy Sundays. How had they never talked about exclusivity? Mark poured his coffee and took a sip, grimacing at the bitterness. Perfect, he muttered. Matches the mood. His phone buzzed. For a split second, his heart jumped. Then he remembered he'd blocked Jenna. The notification was from his group chat, the League of Extraordinary Men. Ryan, heard you're single again. Drinks tonight? Ethan, or we could do wings. Wings heal everything. Ryan, except cholesterol. Ethan, shut up, Ryan. Mark smirked despite himself. Leave it to his friends to turn heartbreak into a punchline before breakfast. He typed back. Appreciate the concern, but I'm good. No wings required. Ryan replied instantly. Liar. You need wings. And beer. And possibly karaoke. Mark set the phone down and shook his head. They meant well, but he wasn't in the mood for loud bars and bad renditions of 80s hits. What he needed was something else. Something that didn't involve Jenna or the hollow ache in his chest. He opened his laptop and stared at the blank search bar. What did people do after a breakup these days? Therapy? Yoga? Join a cult? His fingers hovered, then typed, cooking classes near me. The results popped up. Beginner Italian cooking. Saturday, 6 p.m. Mark tilted his head. Cooking. He liked food. He liked eating food. And maybe learning to make something more ambitious than scrambled eggs would keep his mind occupied. Plus, it sounded normal. Not desperate, not dramatic. Just a guy learning to make pasta. He bookmarked the page and closed the laptop, feeling a flicker of something that wasn't despair. Progress, maybe. Or denial. Either way, it beat sitting around counting the ways his love life had imploded. By lunchtime, Mark was back at the office, pretending to care about quarterly reports while his brain staged a coup. Every cell seemed to whisper, "You got dumped for a coffee shop stranger." He sighed and rubbed his temples. Across the cubicle wall, Ryan popped his head up like a meerkat. "Dude," Ryan said, grinning, "you look like someone stole your puppy." "Didn't have a puppy," Mark said flatly. "Fine. Your dignity, then." Mark shot him a look. "Thanks for the pep talk." Ryan shrugged. "Come out tonight. One beer. One song. You'll feel better." "I'll pass." Ryan squinted. "You're not gonna sit at home and mope, are you?" "Nope," Mark said. "I'm gonna sit at home and sign up for a cooking class." Ryan blinked. "That's weirdly wholesome. Better than karaoke." Ryan grinned. "Fair point. But if you start making your own pasta, I expect samples." Mark smirked. "Deal." That night, Mark sat on his couch with a bowl of takeout noodles and his laptop glowing in front of him. He clicked register for the Saturday class and felt a strange surge of satisfaction. A small step, sure, but a step nonetheless. He leaned back and stared at the ceiling, letting the quiet settle around him. Breakups were messy, even when they ended without fireworks. But maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something better. He didn't know what yet. But he knew one thing. He wasn't going to let Jenna's casual date define his story. Mark closed the laptop, turned on a mindless sitcom, and let himself laugh at jokes that had nothing to do with love, loss, or almond milk. For the first time that day, the silence didn't feel so heavy. Chapter 3. Enter the unexpected. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of January chill that made Mark question every life choice that involved leaving his apartment. He stood outside La Cucina di Amore, a cozy little cooking studio tucked between a yoga studio and a boutique that sold candles with names like Forest Whispers and Moonlight Serenity. Mark pulled his jacket tighter and stared at the glass door. Inside, warm light spilled across polished countertops and rows of gleaming pots. A chalkboard sign read, "Tonight's menu. Handmade pasta and classic marinara." He took a breath. This was fine. Normal. People did this all the time. He wasn't here to rebound or reinvent himself, just to learn how not to burn water. Pushing the door open, he was greeted by a burst of laughter and the rich aroma of garlic. About a dozen people milled around, tying aprons and chatting like they'd all been best friends since kindergarten. "Welcome," a voice rang out, bright and theatrical. Mark turned to see a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and a chef's coat that looked like it had seen better days. His name tag read Giovanni, and his smile could have powered a small city. "You must be Mark," Giovanni declared, sweeping over like a game show host. "Ah, I can tell. You have the look of a man ready to conquer the art of pasta." Mark blinked. "Sure, that's me." Giovanni clapped him on the shoulder. "Bellissimo. Grab an apron, find a station, and prepare to fall in love. With food, of course." Mark managed to smile and moved toward an empty spot near the center island. He was adjusting his apron when someone slid into the station beside him. "Hi," a voice said, warm and lilting. Mark looked up and promptly forgot how words worked. She was striking, but not in the intimidating magazine cover way. More like the kind of beauty that sneaks up on you. The curve of a smile, the spark in her eyes. Her hair was a tumble of chestnut waves, and she wore an apron that read "Whisk Me Away" in bold letters. Hi," Mark said, mentally kicking himself for sounding like a malfunctioning robot. "I'm Sophie," she said, offering a hand dusted with flour. "Mark," he replied, shaking it. Her grip was firm, confident. "First time?" she asked, tilting her head. "At a cooking class?" "Yeah," he said. "Unless you count watching YouTube videos and setting off my smoke alarm." Sophie laughed, a bright, unguarded sound that made something in Mark's chest loosen. "Well, you're in good hands. Giovanni's a legend. Or at least he thinks he is." As if on cue, Giovanni clapped his hands dramatically. "Attention, my culinary warriors. Tonight, we create magic. Pasta from scratch. Flour, eggs, love, and maybe a little chaos." Mark glanced at Sophie. "Chaos I can handle." "Good," she said, grinning. "Because last time, someone accidentally glued their pasta to the counter." Mark chuckled. "Sounds like something I'd do." "Don't worry," Sophie said, eyes twinkling. "I'll save you from disaster. The class began with Giovanni demonstrating the dough-making process, narrating like he was hosting a cooking show for an audience of millions. "Flour is life," he proclaimed, tossing a handful into the air like confetti. "Eggs are the soul. And you," he pointed at Mark, "you are the artist." Mark tried to smile through the sudden pressure of being an artist with zero experience. He cracked his eggs, added flour, and began mixing, only to realize his dough looked less like art and more like something dredged from a swamp. He muttered, poking the sticky mess. "Is this normal?" Sophie leaned over, her own dough a perfect golden sphere. "Depends. Are you aiming for abstract expressionism?" Mark smirked. "More like tragic realism." "Here," she said, sliding closer. "Add a little more flour. And maybe stop stabbing it like it owes you money." He laughed, easing his grip as she guided his hands. Her fingers brushed his, light and sure, and for a moment, the room seemed to shrink to just the two of them and the soft rhythm of kneading dough. "Better," she said, stepping back. "See? You're a natural." "Pretty sure that's a lie," Mark said. But he was smiling now, really smiling, the kind that reached his eyes. By the time they moved on to shaping the pasta, Mark had flour on his shirt, a streak on his cheek, and a growing sense that this was the best decision he'd made in months. Sophie was funny, sharp, and had a way of making even his clumsiest attempts feel like part of the adventure. "So," she said, rolling out a sheet of dough with practiced ease, "what brings you here? Culinary ambition or something else?" Mark hesitated, then opted for honesty. "Breakup." Sophie's eyebrows lifted. "Ah, the classic post-heartbreak pasta therapy." "Something like that," he said, smiling wryly. "Figured learning to cook was better than drowning in beer and bad karaoke." "Definitely," she said, her tone warm but teasing. "Though karaoke has its charms." "Not when Ryan's involved," Mark said. "Trust me." She laughed again, and Mark felt that flicker of something. Interest, curiosity, maybe hope, sparked to life. By the end of the class, they were sitting side by side, twirling their handmade pasta in rich marinara, laughing over Giovanni's dramatic farewell speech. "Not bad for a first-timer," Sophie said, nudging his plate. "Thanks to my lifesaver," Mark replied. She smiled, and for a moment, Mark forgot about Jenna, about the hollow ache that had followed him all week. All he saw was Sophie, her eyes bright, her laugh lingering like music. Maybe, he thought, reality knocking on his door wasn't the end of the world. Maybe it was just the start of a better story. Chapter 4. The X Factor. Jenna Hartley had never thought of herself as careless. Spontaneous, sure. Adventurous, absolutely. But careless? No. At least, not until Wednesday night replayed in her head like a bad sitcom rerun. She sat at her kitchen table, nursing a mug of chamomile tea and staring at her phone like it might offer absolution. Didn't. It just sat there. Black screen, silent judgment. Her parents' voices echoed from the call earlier that day. "Sweetheart," her mom had said gently, "you told him you had a date? With someone else?" "Well, yeah," Jenna had replied, defensive. "We never said we were exclusive." Her dad had snorted. "You've been seeing him for 5 months. That's not casual. That's practically a mortgage in dating years." Jenna groaned and pressed her forehead to the cool wood of the table. In hindsight, it sounded insane. Telling your boyfriend you had a date with another man like it was perfectly normal. But that was the problem, wasn't it? Normal had become warped. Swipe culture, open relationships, keeping options open. It all blurred the lines until she couldn't tell where commitment started and casual ended. She liked Mark. More than liked him. He was steady in a way that felt rare, kind without being boring, funny without trying too hard. He listened. He cared. And now he was gone. She tried calling after their conversation, but the line went straight to voicemail. Texts didn't deliver. Social media? Blocked. The digital equivalent of a slammed door. Jenna sighed and pushed the mug away. She didn't want chaos. She didn't want a carousel of coffee shop strangers. She wanted real. And if that meant swallowing her pride and admitting she'd screwed up, so be it. Her mom's words came back, soft but firm. "If you care about him, fix it. Don't let a misunderstanding end something good." So Jenna opened her laptop and typed, "How to apologize to your boyfriend after accidentally acting like a lunatic." The search results were both horrifying and hilarious. She skimmed articles about owning your mistake, clear communication, and grand gestures. But none of them felt right. Mark wasn't the kind of guy who wanted balloons and a marching band. He wanted honesty. She closed the laptop and stared at the ceiling. Okay, honesty. She could do that. She'd call him. If he ever unblocked her, or maybe email him. Old school but effective. And if that didn't work, she'd find another way. Because losing Mark over something this stupid wasn't an option. Jenna straightened, resolve settling like armor. Tomorrow she'd start fixing this. Somehow. Meanwhile, across town, Mark was laughing at a joke Sophie had just made about Giovanni's dramatic pasta monologue. He didn't know Jenna was sitting in her kitchen, plotting redemption. He didn't know the past was about to knock on his door again. For now, all he knew was that Sophie's smile felt like sunlight, and he wasn't ready to let the night end. Chapter 5. Sparks and second chances. Mark had never thought pasta could feel like a turning point, but here he was, standing outside La Cucina di Amore with Sophie, the winter air crisp against his skin and the faint scent of garlic clinging to his jacket. The class had ended, Giovanni had taken his bow like a Broadway star, and now Mark faced the question that had been quietly humming in the back of his mind since Sophie laughed at his tragic dough. "Walk you to your car?" he asked, casual but hopeful. Sophie smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Sure, unless you're planning to steal it." Mark grinned. "Not unless it's better than mine." They fell into step, their breath puffing in little clouds as they crossed the parking lot. Conversation flowed easily. Movies, music, the eternal debate over pineapple on pizza. She was pro. He was firmly anti. They agreed to disagree. When they reached her car, Sophie leaned against the door, her smile softening. "You know," she said, "you're not nearly as tragic a cook as you think." "Pretty sure my dough would disagree," Mark said. "Your dough was fine," she teased. "Your confidence needs work." Mark chuckled, feeling that flicker of warmth again, the kind that had nothing to do with the January chill. "Guess I'll have to keep practicing." "Guess you will," Sophie said, her eyes meeting his. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. The hum of traffic, the distant bark of a dog, everything fading except the quiet spark between them. Mark wanted to ask for her number. He wanted to say, "Let's do this again." But a voice in his head whispered caution. 5 months ago, he'd thought things were perfect. He wasn't rushing this, not again. So instead, he said, "Thanks for saving me from culinary disaster." "Anytime," Sophie replied, her smile lingering like a promise. "See you around, Mark." He watched her drive away, the taillights glowing like embers in the dark. Then he turned toward his own car, his breath fogging the air, and thought, maybe this is what forward feels like. Meanwhile, Jenna sat at her desk, staring at the blinking cursor on her laptop screen. She drafted 3 emails already, each one worse than the last. Subject: "Hey, too casual." Subject: "About Wednesday, too ominous." Subject: "I'm an idiot, too honest." She groaned and deleted them all. Words had never failed her before. She was the queen of witty banter, the master of charming texts. But now, every sentence felt like a landmine. Her phone buzzed with a message from her mom. "Did you talk to him yet?" Jenna typed back, trying. "He blocked me." 3 dots appeared, then, "Find another way. If you care, fight for it." Jenna set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. Fight for it. She could do that. She would do that. Tomorrow she'd go old school, no texts, no emails. She'd find him in person. Explain everything. Fix what she broke. Because Mark wasn't just another guy. He was the guy, and she wasn't ready to let him go. Across town, Mark sat on his couch, scrolling through his phone with a faint smile. Sophie's laugh still echoed in his head, bright and unguarded. He didn't know Jenna was planning a comeback. He didn't know the past was about to collide with the future. For now, all he knew was that Saturday night felt better than Wednesday, and maybe, just maybe, things were looking up. Chapter 6. Comedy of Errors. Monday morning dawned with the kind of optimism Mark hadn't felt in weeks. He woke up early, brewed coffee that didn't taste like regret, and even ironed his shirt, a rare event that deserved its own parade. The weekend had been good. Better than good. Sophie's laugh still lingered in his head like a favorite song, and for the first time since Wednesday's implosion, he felt like the universe wasn't actively trying to ruin his life. He grabbed his keys, locked the door, and headed to work, humming under his breath. Across town, Jenna was on a mission. She'd spent Sunday plotting her strategy, and now she was armed with determination, a peace-offering latte, and what she hoped was an apology that didn't sound like a TED Talk on modern dating ethics. She tried calling again, still blocked. Texts? Nope. Social media? Digital Siberia. So she'd gone analog. Find him in person, explain everything, and pray he didn't laugh in her face. Her intel was solid. Mark worked at a marketing firm downtown. She'd even remembered the floor number from that time he'd joked about, living in cubicle purgatory. Jenna parked, grabbed the latte, and marched into the building like a woman possessed. Mark was halfway through his second cup of coffee when Ryan popped his head over the cubicle wall. "Morning, heartbreak survivor," Ryan said cheerfully. "How's the pasta king today?" Mark smirked. "Alive, flour-free, making progress." Ryan grinned. "Progress as in, you got her number?" Mark hesitated, then shook his head. "Not yet." Ryan groaned. "Mark, buddy, this is why you're single. You meet a great girl, you vibe, and then you what? Wait for fate to send her back with a handwritten invitation." Mark rolled his eyes. "It's called pacing. It's called self-sabotage," Ryan shot back. "Text her. Call her. Send a carrier pigeon. Something." Mark opened his mouth to reply, then froze as a familiar voice floated across the office. "Hi, I'm looking for Mark Spencer." He turned slowly, and there she was, Jenna, standing at the reception desk, latte in hand, wearing that bright smile that used to make his day, and now made his stomach drop like a malfunctioning elevator. Ryan's eyebrows shot up. "Oh, this just got interesting." Mark muttered something that sounded like a prayer and walked toward Jenna, every step heavy with the weight of impending awkwardness. "Jenna," he said, keeping his tone neutral. "What are you doing here?" She held out the latte like a peace treaty. "I came to apologize." Mark stared at the cup, then at her. "You didn't have to do that." "I did," Jenna said, her voice softening. "I screwed up, Mark. I don't know what I thought. That casual was normal. That exclusivity was old-fashioned. But I was wrong. I like you. I want real. And I'm sorry." Mark exhaled slowly, the words settling like pebbles in a pond. He didn't doubt her sincerity. He didn't even feel angry anymore. But 5 months of good memories didn't erase the fact that she'd shattered his trust with a single sentence. "Jenna," he said carefully, "I appreciate the apology, really. But I think we're just not on the same page." Her smile faltered. "We could be," she said quickly. "If you let me try." Before Mark could respond, Ryan, because of course Ryan, leaned in like a gossip columnist sniffing a headline. "Wow," Ryan said loudly. "This is better than reality TV." Mark shot him a look that could melt steel. Ryan grinned and retreated, muttering something about popcorn. Jenna's eyes searched Mark's face, hopeful and a little desperate. "Just think about it." Mark nodded, because what else could he do? "I'll think about it." She smiled faintly, handed him the latte, and walked out, her heels clicking like punctuation marks on the polished floor. Mark stood there, latte in hand, feeling like someone had hit shuffle on his life playlist. Sophie's laugh. Jenna's apology. Ryan's commentary. It was chaos, the kind Giovanni would probably call bellissimo. And the worst part? He wasn't sure what he wanted. Chapter 7. The heart-to-heart. Mark stared at the latte Jenna had left on his desk like it was a ticking time bomb. It wasn't just coffee. It was a symbol, a question, a complication wrapped in cardboard and foam. He'd spent the rest of the morning pretending to work while his brain staged a full-blown debate club. On one side, 5 months of good memories, Jenna's smile, her honesty now. On the other, the sting of Wednesday, the casual way she'd said date, and the quiet spark he'd felt with Sophie. By lunchtime, he gave up on pretending and wandered into the break room, where Ryan was holding court over a bag of chips like a man who'd conquered snack time. "Spencer," Ryan said, grinning. "How's the love triangle?" Mark groaned. "It's not a triangle." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "2 women, 1 Mark. Sounds triangular to me." Mark dropped into a chair. "I don't know what to do." Ryan crunched a chip thoughtfully. "Okay, let's break it down." Jenna. 5 months, good times, but she thought dating other dudes was fine. Sophie. 1 cooking class, instant chemistry, 0 drama, so far. Mark rubbed his temples. "When you say it like that, it sounds easy." Ryan shrugged. "It is easy. Go with the one who doesn't make you question your sanity." Mark shot him a look. "Life isn't that simple." Ryan grinned. "Sure it is. You want my advice? Call Sophie. Ask her out. Worst case, she says no. Best case, you end up making pasta together forever." Mark laughed despite himself. "You make it sound like a rom-com." Ryan smirked. "Buddy, your life is a rom-com. You just need the big gesture and the quirky best friend. That's me, by the way." Mark shook his head, but the idea lingered. Call Sophie. Ask her out. Simple. Terrifying. That evening, Mark sat on his couch, phone in hand, staring at Sophie's number on the cooking class roster email. His thumb hovered over the screen like it was a detonator. Before he could press call, a notification popped up. New message request. From Jenna. He hesitated, then opened it. "Mark, I know I messed up. I just want a chance to explain. Please." Mark exhaled slowly, the weight of it pressing down. He didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, he set the phone down and grabbed his jacket, because sitting here debating wasn't helping. He needed air. He needed clarity. Meanwhile, Sophie was at her kitchen counter, rolling out dough for practice because apparently, she was the kind of person who turned cooking class into a hobby. Her phone buzzed with a message from Giovanni. "Next class, Thursday. Bring your pasta warriors." She smiled, thinking of Mark, his awkward jokes, the way his smile had crept in slowly like sunlight. She wondered if he'd come back. She hoped he would. Mark didn't know Sophie was thinking about him. He didn't know Jenna was planning her next move. All he knew was that the night air felt sharp and clean, and for the first time in days he felt like maybe, just maybe, he was ready to choose what came next. Chapter 8. The big gesture. Mark Spencer had never been the grand gesture type. He wasn't the guy who rented hot air balloons or hired flash mobs to dance in public squares. But after 3 days of overthinking, pacing, and ignoring Jenna's increasingly heartfelt messages, he decided he needed to do something. Something that said, "I'm moving forward. I'm choosing this." And by this, he meant Sophie. The idea hit him Thursday morning like a lightning bolt, or maybe like a toaster falling into a bathtub. Either way, it was sudden, slightly dangerous, and probably ill-advised. He'd invite Sophie to dinner. Not just any dinner, a dinner he cooked himself. Handmade pasta, marinara, maybe even dessert if he didn't burn down his kitchen in the process. It was bold. It was romantic. It was terrifying. Mark spent his lunch break Googling recipes and watching Giovanni's YouTube channel, which was somehow even more dramatic online than in person. Flour is passion. Eggs are destiny. Giovanni bellowed at the camera, tossing ingredients like confetti. By 6 p.m., Mark was in his kitchen, sleeves rolled up, apron on, and confidence at an all-time low. He cracked eggs, sifted flour, and tried to channel his inner Italian chef. The dough looked decent until it didn't. One wrong flick of the wrist and half the flour exploded across the counter like a snowstorm. "Okay," Mark muttered, coughing through the cloud. "Minor setback." He soldiered on, rolling out pasta with the determination of a man who refused to let carbohydrates defeat him. The sauce was next, simple, right? Tomatoes, garlic, olive oil. Except the garlic burned, the tomatoes splattered, and the smoke alarm began shrieking like a banshee. Mark flailed with a dish towel, praying the neighbors didn't call the fire department. By the time the alarm stopped, his kitchen looked like a crime scene. Flour on the floor, sauce on the walls, and a pot of noodles that had fused into a single tragic lump. He stared at the mess, hands on his hips. "Perfect," he muttered. "Just perfect." At 7:15, Sophie knocked on the door. Mark froze. He'd invited her before the pasta apocalypse, assuming he'd have everything under control. Now, he was standing in a kitchen that looked like a culinary war zone. He opened the door, trying for casual. "Hey!" Sophie blinked, taking in the faint smell of smoke and the streak of flour on his cheek. "Wow," she said, eyes twinkling. "You've been busy." Mark laughed, because what else could he do? "So, funny story. I was going to cook you dinner." "And?" she prompted, stepping inside. "And the pasta staged a coup," Mark said. The sauce joined in. It was chaos. Giovanni would be proud. Sophie looked around, then burst out laughing. A bright, unguarded sound that made Mark's embarrassment melt like butter on hot bread. "You tried," she said, touching his arm lightly. "That's what counts." "Pretty sure what counts is edible food," Mark said wryly. "Well," Sophie said, pulling out her phone. "Good thing I know a great pizza place." Mark grinned, relief flooding in. Pizza sounds perfect. An hour later, they were sitting on his couch, sharing a large pepperoni and laughing over the disaster that had been his big gesture. Sophie teased him mercilessly, and Mark took it with good humor, because somehow, failure had turned into the best night he'd had in months. As she reached for another slice, her fingers brushed his, and for a moment, the laughter faded into something quieter, warmer. Mark felt his breath catch, the spark between them flaring like a match in the dark. Maybe, he thought, grand gestures weren't about perfection. Maybe they were about trying, about showing up, messy and flawed, and hoping someone saw the effort behind the chaos. And judging by Sophie's smile, she did. Chapter 9. The X returns? Again. Friday night was supposed to be simple. Pizza, laughter, maybe a movie. Mark had planned an easy, low-pressure evening with Sophie after the pasta fiasco. No flour explosions, no smoke alarms, just two people enjoying each other's company without the universe throwing curveballs. The universe, however, had other plans. Mark was in the kitchen pouring drinks when the doorbell rang. Sophie was curled up on the couch, scrolling through movie options. He smiled, thinking she'd picked something light, maybe a rom-com, ironic as that would be, and went to answer the door. He opened it and his smile froze. "Hi," Jenna said, standing there like a plot twist in heels. Her hair was perfect, her coat chic, and in her hands was a small gift bag that screamed, "I'm here to make amends." Mark blinked. "Jenna, can we talk?" she asked, her voice soft, hopeful. Mark's brain scrambled for words, but before he could form a coherent sentence, Sophie's voice floated from the living room. "Mark, did you find the remote?" Jenna's eyes widened. "You have company." Mark felt his stomach drop like a malfunctioning elevator. Yeah." Sophie appeared in the doorway, smiling, until she saw Jenna. Then her smile faltered, replaced by polite confusion. "Hi." Jenna straightened, her expression shifting from hopeful to something sharper. "Hello." Mark cleared his throat, wishing the floor would open up and swallow him whole. "Sophie, this is Jenna." "Jenna, Sophie." "Nice to meet you," Sophie said, her tone calm but cool. "Likewise," Jenna replied, her voice tight enough to cut glass. Mark could practically hear Ryan's voice in his head. This is better than reality TV. The silence stretched, thick and awkward, until Jenna broke it. "I just came to apologize," she said, holding out the gift bag like a peace treaty. "Mark, I didn't mean to hurt you. I was stupid. I want to fix things." Sophie's eyebrows lifted. "Fix things?" Mark felt heat crawl up his neck. "Jenna, I know I messed up," Jenna pressed on, her eyes locked on his. "But I care about you. I don't want to lose you over a misunderstanding." Sophie crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "Sounds like you two have history." Mark swallowed hard. "We dated. For a while." Jenna's gaze flicked to Sophie, then back to Mark. "And now?" Mark opened his mouth, but the words tangled like spaghetti. He wasn't ready for this conversation. Not with Sophie standing there. Not with Jenna looking like she'd walked out of a redemption arc. "Now," Sophie said, her voice steady, He was about to watch a movie with me. Jenna's jaw tightened. I see. Mark stepped in quickly, hands raised like a man defusing a bomb. Okay, let's not turn this into a scene. Jenna, I appreciate the apology. Really. But I've moved on. Jenna's face fell, the hope draining like water through a sieve. So that's it. Mark nodded, gentle but firm. That's it. For a moment, Jenna stood there, silent. Then she handed him the gift bag, her fingers trembling just slightly. I hope you're happy, Mark. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking like punctuation marks on the night. Mark closed the door slowly, the weight of the moment pressing down. When he turned, Sophie was watching him, her expression softer now, but curious. You okay? She asked. Mark exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Yeah, just didn't expect that. Sophie smiled faintly. Life's full of surprises. Mark chuckled, the tension easing. Tell me about it. She stepped closer, her hand brushing his. So, movie? Mark smiled, grateful for the simplicity of the question. Movie. And just like that, the chaos faded, at least for now. Chapter 10. The turning point. The movie played softly in the background, but neither Mark nor Sophie was paying attention. They sat side by side on the couch, the glow of the screen washing over them in flickers of light and shadow. For a while, they laughed, shared pizza, and pretended Jenna's unexpected visit hadn't happened. But now, the silence between them felt heavier, like a question waiting to be asked. Sophie shifted slightly, tucking her legs beneath her. So, she said, her voice calm but curious. That was intense. Mark exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah, not exactly how I pictured tonight. She seemed invested, Sophie said carefully. Mark nodded. She was. For a while. He paused, searching for the right words. We dated for 5 months. Things were good, until they weren't. Sophie tilted her head. What happened? Mark hesitated, then decided honesty was better than half-truths. She told me she had a date, with someone else, like it was normal. He gave a short, humorless laugh. Turns out we weren't on the same page. Sophie's expression softened. Ouch. Yeah, Mark said quietly. I didn't blow up or anything. Just walked away, blocked her, tried to move on. And now? Sophie asked, her tone gentle but probing. Mark looked at her, really looked at her. The curve of her smile, the warmth in her eyes, the way she seemed to listen without judgment. Now, he said slowly, I'm sitting here wondering if I'm about to screw things up again. Sophie's brows furrowed. Why would you screw things up? Because, Mark said, his voice low, I like you, a lot, and that scares me more than I want to admit. Sophie was quiet for a moment, her gaze steady. Then she smiled. A small, reassuring smile that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. You know what scares me? She said softly. Not trying. Mark blinked. Not trying. Yeah, Sophie said, leaning in slightly. Life's messy. People make mistakes. But if you spend all your time worrying about perfect timing or perfect choices, you miss the good stuff. The real stuff. Mark let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. You make it sound simple. It's not, Sophie said, her smile widening. But it's worth it. For a moment, they just looked at each other, the air between them charged with something quiet and undeniable. Then, slowly, Mark reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Her fingers curled around his, warm and sure. I don't want perfect, Mark said, his voice steady now. I just want real. Sophie's eyes softened. Then you're in luck, she whispered. Because that's all I've got. Mark laughed, a low, relieved sound. And in that moment, the weight of the past slipped away like a coat he no longer needed. He leaned in, and when their lips met, it wasn't fireworks or fanfare. It was something better. Simple, honest, and real. Across town, Jenna sat in her car, staring at the gift bag receipt crumpled in her hand. She'd tried. She'd fought. But sometimes timing wasn't enough. Sometimes the story moved on without you. She wiped her eyes, started the engine, and drove away, quietly, without drama. Because maybe letting go was its own kind of courage. Back on the couch, Mark and Sophie curled together, the movie forgotten, the world outside fading to nothing. For the first time in a long time, Mark felt like he wasn't chasing perfect anymore. He was living it, messy, flawed, and beautiful. Chapter 11. Perfectly Imperfect. 2 weeks later, Mark stood in his kitchen, staring at a ball of dough like it was a live grenade. He'd promised Sophie dinner, real dinner, not pizza delivery, and tonight was the night. No smoke alarms, no flour explosions, no pasta mutiny. Just redemption. He rolled up his sleeves, tied on his apron, and whispered a silent prayer to the culinary gods. Giovanni's voice echoed in his head like a dramatic soundtrack. Flour is passion. Eggs are destiny. Mark cracked the eggs, sifted the flour, and, miracle of miracles, managed to keep most of it on the counter instead of the floor. The dough came together, smooth and golden, and when he rolled it out, it didn't resemble a crime scene. Progress. By the time Sophie arrived, the kitchen smelled like garlic and hope. She stepped inside, her smile lighting up the room. Wow, she said, eyes wide. You've been busy. Mark grinned, flour dusting his cheek like a badge of honor. Redemption arc. Sophie laughed, setting down a bottle of wine. I'm impressed. Don't be yet, Mark said, gesturing to the pot of simmering sauce. Still time for disaster. But there wasn't. The pasta cooked perfectly. The sauce was rich and fragrant. And when they sat down at the table, candles flickering, wine poured, it felt like something out of a movie. Not the kind with grand gestures and choreographed dance numbers. The kind with quiet moments, laughter, and two people who decided to stop chasing perfect and start living real. They ate, they talked, they teased each other about pineapple on pizza. Still a stalemate. And when the plates were cleared, Sophie leaned back in her chair, her smile soft and warm. You know, she said, you're not bad at this. Mark smirked. Pretty sure that's a lie. Pretty sure it's not, Sophie said, reaching across the table to take his hand. You tried. That's what counts. Mark squeezed her fingers gently, his chest tightening in the best way. Guess that's the theme, huh? Trying. Trying, Sophie echoed, her eyes bright. And not giving up when it gets messy. Mark laughed, the sound low and easy. Messy I can handle. Good, Sophie said, her smile widening. Because life's messy. Mark leaned in, his voice soft. So is pasta. She laughed. And when he kissed her, it wasn't fireworks. It was something better. Simple. Honest. Perfectly imperfect. Later, Mark stood at the sink, washing dishes while Sophie dried. Flour still clung to the counter. A streak of sauce marked his apron, and the wine glasses were slightly mismatched. It wasn't flawless. It wasn't Instagram-worthy. But it was real. And for the first time in a long time, Mark felt like he'd stopped waiting for perfect and started living something better. Across town, Jenna sat in a cafe, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone. She deleted the old messages, archived the memories, and started fresh. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Because sometimes letting go wasn't failure, it was freedom. She smiled faintly, watching the steam curl from her cup. Life was messy, but maybe, just maybe, that was the point. Back in Mark's kitchen, Sophie tossed him a towel, laughing as he missed the catch and sent it flying into the sink. He laughed too, and in that moment he knew. This was it. Not perfect, not polished, just real. And that was enough. Epilogue. Flour, love, and everything in between. 6 months later, Mark stood in his kitchen, sleeves rolled up, apron tied, and confidence soaring, or at least hovering somewhere above mild panic. The counters gleamed, the dough rested under a towel, and the sauce simmered gently like a well-behaved child. He glanced at the clock. Sophie would be home any minute. Home. The word still felt new, like a favorite song he hadn't stopped humming since the day she moved in. Mark stirred the sauce, inhaling the rich aroma of garlic and tomatoes. No smoke alarms this time. No flour explosions. Just calm, steady progress. The front door opened, and Sophie's voice floated in, warm and familiar. Smells amazing. Mark grinned, wiping his hands on a towel as she stepped into the kitchen, her hair wind-tossed, her smile lighting up the room. Redemption arc, part 2, he said proudly. Sophie laughed, setting down her bag. You've come a long way from the great pasta coup. Never living that down, am I? Mark teased. Not a chance, Sophie said, wrapping her arms around his waist. It's part of your charm. Mark kissed her forehead, feeling that quiet certainty settle in. The kind that didn't need fireworks or grand gestures. Just two people, a messy kitchen, and a love that had grown out of chaos and laughter. Dinner's almost ready, he said. And this time, I promise it's edible. Sophie smiled, her eyes soft. Even if it's not, I'm staying. Mark chuckled, pulling her close. Good, because life's messy. And so is pasta, Sophie whispered, her laughter mingling with his. They stood there for a moment, the sauce bubbling gently behind them, the world outside fading to nothing. Perfect? No. Perfectly imperfect? Absolutely. And that was all they needed.